What's up, everyone? In this video, I want to talk about how to film your lifts. One of the cool things about working with weightlifters and powerlifters is that many of you, if not all of you, film nearly all your top sets. Now, this is a really useful thing as a clinician because most of the time when people come in to see me and they have pain or they have had an injury related to the lift, I get to see it on film. I get to either watch the injury or watch the lift that was done when the pain started developing. And this can be a really useful thing for me. And just like, I've been making this argument for years, just like if we have a runner who has pain with running, we want to assess that. It's a pretty fair thing to say at this point. I don't think it's any different for weightlifters and powerlifters. If you have pain with the lifts, I want to see the lift. I don't want to just watch your air squat. Now, most of you are doing this filming already, but there's a couple things we can make a little bit better, I think. If we want to try to reliably assess motion with 2D video, which is what we're doing when we film this with our iPhones, we're going to have to sort of borrow from our running research. And the reason is we don't really have good data on how reliable it is to assess squat, deadlift, clean and jerk, snatch. We don't have any data that tells us how reliable that is. However, we do have good data at this point. We have several studies that we can borrow from the running research that tells us that when we compare 2D video to 3D assessment, this video is reliable. And so I'm just going to sort of borrow from the lessons we've learned from running, and I'm going to apply them to weightlifting, powerlifting. And yes, they're two completely different things, but running is a complex movement with high speed and high turnover. Well, so is weightlifting. Powerlifting, we've got some complex movements. Generally with top sets, they're a little slower. But if we can assess running, I think it's reasonable to say we can assess weightlifting and powerlifting. So if we're going to do it, let's do it right. And let's borrow from the running research to learn some lessons here. So first of all, what do you wear during the assessment? There are so many people that have black on black outfits and it's baggy clothing. That's really going to limit the view of the hips, pelvis. So if you're going to choose something to wear, choose lighter colors and try to make the top different from the bottom. So two different colors. We want to be able to clearly separate the upper and the lower body. Now, if you're comfortable with it, guys, no shirt, shorts above the knee. Girls, sports bra, shorts above the knee. And if you're not comfortable with that, which is of course very reasonable, at the very minimum, try to wear something that's a little tighter fitting. Again, baggy clothing, we just can't see very much. Something that's a little tighter fitting, and tuck your shirt into your shorts so that, again, we can separate and we can see the waistline, separate the upper and lower body. Don't wear foreign shoes. Wear the shoes that you typically lift in. And if you're going to lift barefoot, which can be a very useful assessment, just make sure you're familiar with barefoot lifting. I don't want to see somebody who's used to wearing a platform shoe film a barefoot lift if it's completely different to them. That's going to sort of throw off the assessment as well. There are times when I will ask for a barefoot film, but there's usually reasons behind that. So shoes that you're used to, and then you've got the clothing cue for me. I wrote all this down so I wouldn't miss anything. As far as lighting goes, sometimes people will put the camera facing a window or facing a light source. This is going to turn your body into a grayscale or a shadow object. So if you're going to have a light source from like a window or you're using your own lighting, the lighting needs to be behind the camera, facing the same direction the camera's pointing. That way it really lights up the body so it's not too dark. When you set the camera up for squat, deadlift, snatch, clean and jerk, you don't want the camera to move, so use a tripod. Set that tripod to the height of your waist, kind of right in what we would call the center of mass area. We don't want it from the floor looking up, angled up. We don't want it from above you, angled down. We don't want any oblique angulation. Right now, most people are filming from sort of a front oblique angle or a back oblique angle, sort of off to the side. And when I ask why, the athletes say, well, usually it's what my coach asked me to do, or they just see other people doing it. And then if I ask the coach, it's usually, well, I can see the most out of the lift. I can watch most of the lift. I can see most of the body whenever they film like that. And that's, of course, reasonable. But my argument there is that if you have an oblique angulation, you cannot reliably assess any of the movements that you're trying to from those planes. So, tripod to have the camera sit still, set at waist height, and again, no oblique angulation. So we want that camera to face straight on from the front, straight on from the back, and then straight on from the side. Now, when you set it up, you're gonna have to set it to where when you step back with the weight, if you're squatting, when you step back, then you're in line with the camera. If you set it in line with your waist at the bar, when you step back, now you might even be out of the picture. So straight front, back, and side view, no angulation, tripod set to waist height. The camera, we want something that's going to film with at least 120 frames per second. The good news is most new phone cameras will do this now, but this is really important because when we watch this film, one of the whole points of filming this is that I can slow it down and watch this in slow-mo, because the naked eye misses a lot with a high-speed movement. It's why with running, we tend to watch slower videos. So we're gonna watch this video in slow-mo, and usually what I'll do is actually drag and look at different frames. Now, if we have a really low FPS, when I drag that little cursor to watch these movements occur, there's big jumps in the motion. The faster the speed, the more I'm gonna miss whenever I try to drag and watch. So 120 FPS on the camera. And let's see. Oh, the last thing is, don't film your first set. So this is just like running. What we tend to have people do is we have them run for a few minutes, maybe 5 minutes, just to sort of get the feel of things, get kind of warmed up and fall into their normal pattern. I tend to ask for the same thing with the lifting. Now, luckily enough, like I said in the beginning, most of you are filming your top sets. So you've already gone through your warm-up sets, and this is kind of what I'm looking for. The other reason I like the top sets is because I will often be able to assess form fatigue. That's useful to me because if we're going to see things break down, I want to see what breaks down first. I want to see what those movement patterns look like. And if we're doing something that's really lightweight over the first few reps, you still might be figuring out the lift, or it's just so light that it doesn't matter, and it's kind of no different than air squatting. And if you're a heavy lifter with pain related to heavier loads, I want to see the heavier loads. Now that is for, like we said, that's for squat, deadlift, clean and jerk, snatch. That setup will work really well. Bench press is a little harder. I don't even know if it's worth talking about. I think people are going to be mad at me if I don't talk about bench press. The best view by far out of all the views for bench press I have found is the bird's eye view with the camera set right in the middle of the chest. I get to see elbow angles, shoulders moving around. I get to see the waist. There's a lot I get to watch. That's my favorite view, but it's also the hardest one to pull off. So what I've seen people do is they'll hang it's like their anchor for their phone or their camera. They'll hang it from the ceiling and they just have it hanging there so they can sort of put their phone inside of it or their camera. Most people are using phones and they can just clip in and there they go. So it takes them a while to set it up, but then once it's there, they have it. I don't necessarily ask a lot of people to do this because it's kind of a pain in the butt. If you're gonna film bench, most of the stuff we already said applies, but now on the tripod, rather than setting it to waist height when you're standing, you're gonna set it to the height of your chest. And you can do side views, which give us a little bit, but the front and the back view are probably the second best to the bird's eye view. So straight from behind you, kind of right in line with your skull, set to about the height of your chest, and then you'll film in the front of you. This is a bit of an exposed view, just FYI. Most people have their legs open, so it's kind of an awkward film. I get that. This isn't stuff that we necessarily need to post. When you're just posting this stuff on social, feel free to do your angles. Don't do anything you feel uncomfortable with. But when we're going to have these assessed, it's much more useful to have straight on versus oblique angulation. So I hope this was helpful. I'm kind of selfish. I love data. So all the stuff I get, I tend to try to track over time. I'm really curious. I'm so grateful that all of you film all of your lifts. But again, if we're going to film it, let's come up with the best filming method that we can so that we can make it as reliable as possible. And we're just going to borrow from our running research right now on 2D video assessment because we know that is reliable when compared to 3D. And so if we say that that's the truth for running, well, let's say for now, until we have higher quality studies, we'll say that if we make it as reliable as we can, then we're reliably assessing those lifts. I hope this was helpful, and thanks.